They say success demands sacrifice, but no one ever warns you that sometimes the price is your soul. I used to believe I could have it all: love, respect, ambition, and a future that glittered like the skyline outside our tiny apartment window. But life, I've learned, doesn't reward dreams. It tests them until they crumble. My name is Elena Moore, and until a few months ago, I thought I was happy. My husband, Shah Jahan, and I had been married for 5 years. We built our life on laughter, takeout dinners, and late-night promises that someday things would get easier. He was a freelance designer, creative, kind, and endlessly hopeful, the kind of man who still believed in love letters and honesty. But hope doesn't pay rent, and dreams don't erase debt. I worked as an executive assistant at a major marketing firm, a place where smiles were masks and ambition was the only language anyone truly spoke. My boss, Mr. Hayes, was the kind of man people feared and admired in equal measure: wealthy, confident, and used to getting what he wanted. When he spoke, people listened. When he smiled, it usually meant someone else was about to fall. Shah Jahan. And I started drifting apart long before I noticed it. It wasn't sudden. It was a slow, quiet unraveling, the kind that doesn't break hearts overnight, but erodes them piece by piece. I blamed the economy, his unstable work, my exhaustion. Anything but us. I told myself that if I could just get promoted, everything would fall back into place. We'd have money, security, maybe even happiness. Then came the email, a company-wide announcement about a senior position opening in the department. The promotion was everything I had been waiting for. Double the salary, real authority, a chance to finally be seen. I could already picture Shah Jahan's proud smile, our debts erased, our marriage saved. But when I stepped into Mr. Hayes' office to express my interest, I saw something in his eyes that made my stomach twist, a kind of unspoken understanding. He didn't ask about my qualifications. He didn't ask for my resume. He only asked one question, his voice low and deliberate. "Tell me, Elena, how far are you willing to go for what you want?" I smiled that day, a nervous, fragile smile, thinking I could outsmart the game. I was wrong. That question was not an invitation. It was a warning, and by the time I understood it, it was already too late. The following week unfolded like a storm I could sense but couldn't escape. The promotion everyone was whispering about had turned into the company's latest obsession. I worked harder than ever, arriving early, staying late, answering emails at midnight just to prove I was worthy. But beneath all that effort, an uneasy truth lingered in the air. Merit wasn't enough. Not in Mr. Hayes' world. He called me into his office one Thursday afternoon. The blinds were half drawn, the lights dimmed to a golden hue that made everything feel too intimate, too personal. He motioned for me to sit, his tone casual yet heavy with unspoken meaning. "Elena," he said, leaning back in his chair, "you've been doing remarkable work lately. You have potential most people here will never touch." I thanked him, trying to sound calm, though my heart thudded in my chest. Compliments from Mr. Hayes were rare and rarely came without a cost. He smiled faintly. "You're ambitious. I can see that. You want more than just a desk and a paycheck. You want recognition, power, a better life, don't you?" I hesitated. The air between us felt thick. He wasn't wrong. I did want those things. I wanted them so badly it hurt. "Yes," I finally admitted. He stood, walked to the window, and looked out over the city. "I reward ambition, Elena, but not everyone has the courage to show it." When he turned back, his gaze lingered too long, the kind that made my skin crawl. "There's a dinner this weekend," he continued smoothly. "A small company event. Bring your husband. I like to know the people behind my best employees." For a moment, I relaxed. Maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe he just wanted to meet Shah Jahan, to see who I was outside the office. I smiled politely, hiding my unease. "Of course, sir. We'd be honored." But the way he looked at me, like a cat watching a trapped bird, made something inside me shiver. That evening, I told Shah Jahan about the invitation. He was surprised but supportive. "Maybe this is your chance," he said, his voice warm and hopeful. "If he likes you, that promotion could finally happen." I smiled. pretending to share his excitement, though deep down, dread coiled in my stomach. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Mr. Hayes's glances during meetings felt heavier, his comments sharper, more personal. He'd say things like, "You deserve better than what life's giving you," or "Some opportunities only come once. Don't hesitate when they do." The night before the dinner, I barely slept. I kept imagining how it would go, how I'd impress him with grace and intelligence, how Shah Jahan would be proud of me. But another thought kept creeping in, one I didn't dare say aloud. What if he expects something more than professionalism? Still, I convinced myself it would be fine. I needed this promotion. I needed to save our marriage, to feel like I was worth something. As I lay awake beside Shah Jahan, watching him sleep peacefully, guilt pricked at me like 1,000 needles. I told myself I was doing this for us, for our future. But even then, in the quiet darkness, a whisper deep inside me asked, what if the cost is something I can never get back? The night of the company dinner arrived with the kind of stillness that makes your skin prickle. The city outside glittered with promise, but inside me, something felt wrong, like a shadow I couldn't shake. Shah Jahan looked handsome in his only suit, the one he wore to our wedding. He'd even fixed the loose button himself. I, on the other hand, stood before the mirror in a sleek black dress that felt less like fabric and more like armor. I told myself it was confidence I saw in my reflection, but beneath the eyeliner and forced smile, fear was whispering, "Don't go." The event was held at the Grand Marlowe Hotel, a place where crystal chandeliers sparkled like frozen stars, and every corner smelled of wealth. I clung to Shah Jahan's arm as we entered, trying to drown my unease in the hum of laughter and clinking glasses. Mr. Hayes spotted us immediately. He was standing near the bar, perfectly composed, a glass of champagne in his hand. His smile widened when he saw me, too wide, too knowing. "Elena," he greeted warmly, his voice smooth as silk. "You look extraordinary tonight, and this must be your husband." Shah Jahan extended a hand politely. Shah Jahan Moore. "Of course," Mr. Hayes said, shaking it with a practiced charm. "I've heard so much about you. I can see where Elena gets her creativity." Shah Jahan laughed lightly, unaware of the double meaning that made my stomach tighten. The night went on, toasts, laughter, polite conversations. I tried to enjoy it, but I could feel Mr. Hayes's gaze on me, constant and unrelenting. Every time our eyes met, he smiled as if we shared a secret no one else knew. I hated it, and yet I said nothing. Later, he invited a small group of us to the rooftop lounge for a private celebration. By then, most guests had left. The city lights stretched endlessly below, and the night air felt too thin. Shah Jahan and I followed, though my heart pounded with unease. "Would you like a drink?" Mr. Hayes asked Shah Jahan, handing him a glass before turning to me. "And for you, Elena? Something stronger, perhaps?" I nodded silently, accepting the glass though I barely touched it. The conversation drifted from business to life, success, and what it takes to rise above the rest. At one point, Mr. Hayes stood close behind me, his hand resting too easily on the back of my chair. Shah Jahan noticed. His expression hardened, but he said nothing. The silence between us was louder than any argument we'd ever had. Finally, Mr. Hayes leaned in and whispered, low enough that only I could hear, "You've already proven yourself in every way that matters at work. But I want to know how far your dedication goes outside the office." My breath caught. The world seemed to tilt. I felt Shah Jahan's eyes on me, sharp and questioning. "Mr. Hayes?" I managed, forcing a smile. "I think you're crossing a line." He chuckled softly. "Relax, Elena. I'm only testing your composure. You can't expect to move up in this world without learning how to handle pressure." But there was something else in his tone, a challenge, a dare wrapped in false charm. Shah Jahan finally spoke. "I think that's enough, Mr. Hayes." His voice was calm but cold. Mr. Hayes turned to him, unbothered. "You're a lucky man, Shah Jahan. Most husbands would kill to have a wife as ambitious as yours." Something in me cracked. Shame, anger, and fear collided in my chest. I wanted to leave, to run, to erase the entire evening. But I stayed, frozen between the man I loved and the man who held my career in his hands. The night ended in heavy silence. Mr. Hayes offered a final smile, smooth, victorious, unreadable. "You'll hear from me soon about the promotion," he said, before walking away. Shah Jahan and I drove home, without a word. The city lights blurred through the windshield like tears I refused to shed. I could feel his disappointment, his quiet hurt, filling the space between us like smoke. When we got home, he finally spoke. "You knew what he wanted, didn't you?" I didn't answer. I couldn't, because deep down I knew he was right. And the worst part was I had already decided how far I was willing to go. That was the night my world began to collapse. Not with a scream, but with a silence that said everything I was too afraid to confess. The morning after that dinner felt heavier than any hangover. The air in our apartment was thick with things unsaid, every corner echoing with the silence that had followed us home. Shah Jahan moved around quietly, avoiding my eyes. I wanted him to yell, to demand answers, to break the unbearable stillness. But he didn't, and somehow that hurt more. When I walked into the office that day, the first thing I saw was an email marked confidential. "Congratulations, Elena. Effective immediately. You've been promoted to senior executive assistant." It should have been the happiest moment of my career. Instead, my stomach turned. I stared at the screen, feeling none of the joy I had imagined. I should have called Shah Jahan, told him the good news. But my hands wouldn't move. The words, "you've been promoted," felt more like a verdict than a victory. Mr. Hayes congratulated me later that morning, his voice smooth, eyes sharp. "You earned this, Elena," he said with that same unreadable smile. "You've proven you can make the hard choices." Hard choices. That was his phrase, the one that echoed in my head long after he walked away. Everyone else in the office smiled at me, shook my hand, whispered, "You deserve it." But I couldn't stop wondering what they really thought. Did they know? Had they guessed? Or was the guilt eating me alive from the inside, turning even innocent glances into judgment? When I got home that evening, Shah Jahan was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV. The soft glow flickered across his face, but his eyes were somewhere far away. "You got it?" he asked flatly, without looking at me. "Yes," I whispered. "I did." He nodded once. "Good for you." 2 words. That was all he said. No smile, no congratulations, just the quiet finality of someone who had already stopped fighting. In the days that followed, our marriage began to unravel completely. Conversations turned into nods, meals into silence. Shah Jahan started spending long hours at work, then longer hours out, not cheating, not escaping exactly, just drifting. We were 2 ghosts haunting the same house, too proud to admit we were already gone. Meanwhile, the office became its own kind of prison. My new title came with a bigger desk, a window view, and a constant reminder of the man who owned my secret. Mr. Hayes grew more confident around me, his tone casual but filled with insinuations. He would lean too close during meetings, compliment me too easily in front of others. Once, when I tried to pull away from his hand resting on my arm, he smiled coldly. "Don't act like you're better than this. Elena, you want a success. You got it." That night, I went home and cried in the shower until my throat ached. The water couldn't wash it away. The guilt, the shame, the memory of Shah Jahan's face when he realized who I had become. One evening, I came home to find Shah Jahan's wedding ring on the kitchen table. Just a ring. No note, no goodbye. I stood there for a long time, staring at it, the silence around me almost unbearable. He had left without confrontation, without blame, as if he knew I already carried enough punishment inside me. I didn't chase him. I couldn't. What could I possibly say? That I did it for us? That it was just one night? That the promotion wasn't worth the emptiness that came with it? None of it would matter. The damage was done. The next morning, I walked into my office and sat at my new desk. My prize, my curse. The city skyline looked different now, stripped of its beauty. Every reflection in the glass reminded me of the woman I used to be, ambitious, hopeful, clean. Now, I was everything I swore I'd never become. And though the world called me successful, I had never felt so utterly, completely lost. It happened slowly at first, the kind of unraveling that no one else notices until it's complete. To the outside world, I was thriving. I wore power suits, led meetings, and smiled in photographs that decorated the company's website. My name was whispered in boardrooms as an example of dedication and ambition. But behind the smile was a silence that grew heavier each day. Shah Jahan's absence became a ghost that followed me everywhere. His toothbrush still sat by the sink. His jacket still hung by the door, remnants of a life I had destroyed with my own hands. I'd sometimes wake up in the middle of the night expecting to find him beside me, only to face the cold emptiness of my mistakes. At work, things began to shift. Mr. Hayes' attention, once suffocating, started to drift elsewhere. A new intern, young, eager, wide-eyed, joined the team. I caught him looking at her the way he once looked at me, and something inside me twisted. I realized how disposable I was. I had traded everything for a place that was never truly mine. Whispers began to spread, quiet, poisonous ones that crept through the office halls like smoke. I'd walk past and feel eyes on me, hear the subtle laughter cut short as I entered a room. It didn't take long for the rumors to find their way to me, that I had earned my promotion in ways that had nothing to do with work. No one said it to my face, but they didn't have to. Their silence said enough. I tried to confront Mr. Hayes one afternoon, desperate to salvage what little dignity I had left. "People are talking," I said, forcing the words past a lump in my throat. "You need to make it stop." He looked up from his desk, unbothered. "Let them talk. It's not my job to control gossip. Elena, maybe you should focus on doing yours." I stared at him, realizing in that moment just how naive I had been. To him, I was a transaction, a stepping stone in his endless climb. Whatever had passed between us meant nothing. After that, I stopped trying to defend myself. My work slipped. I began missing deadlines, forgetting meetings. Every time I walked into that office, I felt smaller, like the walls were closing in. My reputation had been hollowed out from the inside. I could hear it cracking. Then came the final blow. During a quarterly meeting, Mr. Hayes announced a restructuring plan. My position was being merged with another department. It was framed as a strategic move, but everyone knew what it meant. I was being quietly pushed out. The same man who once promised me success now dismissed me with a polite smile and a handshake. "Best of luck in your future endeavors," he said, as if I were just another name to erase. That night, I sat alone in the office long after everyone had gone. The city lights outside flickered like cruel reminders of the dream I'd chased, the dream that had cost me everything. My phone buzzed once, an unknown number, then silence. For a moment, I hoped it was Shah Jahan, but it wasn't. It struck me then. I had nothing left to lose because I'd already given it all away, my love, my self-respect, my peace. When I finally walked out of that office, box of belongings in hand, I didn't feel anger or sadness, just emptiness. And in that emptiness, I finally understood collapse doesn't come with an explosion. It comes with quiet acceptance, when you stop fighting for what's already gone. Months passed before I could look at myself in the mirror without flinching. I moved into a small apartment across town, a quiet, forgotten corner of the city where no one knew my name, where I could start over, or at least pretend to. The walls were bare, the room silent, but for the first time in years, the silence belonged to me. I spent my days wandering to the park near my building, watching people hurry by. Couples holding hands, children laughing, strangers chasing lives that still had meaning. I envied them. They didn't know how precious trust was until it was gone. Sometimes I catch myself wondering where Shah Jahan was, whether he'd moved on, whether he still thought of me with anger or pity. I never reached out. What could I possibly say that would make any difference? Some words, once spoken, can't heal what silence already buried. One rainy afternoon, I found an old photo of us while unpacking a box. Our wedding day, both of us smiling under sky, so bright it seemed to promise forever. I ran my fingers over the image, tracing the curve of his grin, the warmth in his eyes. It hurt to realize that the woman in that picture no longer existed. She had been traded for a title, a lie, and the illusion of power. People often say time heals, but I've learned that time doesn't heal. It simply teaches you how to live with the ache. My ache was constant, quiet, and strangely grounding. It reminded me of who I'd been and who I'd become. One morning, I sat by the window, a cup of coffee growing cold in my hands, and watched the city wake up. For the first time, I didn't feel anger, just clarity. Everything I'd ever wanted had been right in front of me. A husband who loved me, a simple life built on honesty and hope. I had thrown it away, chasing a version of success that was never real. I whispered his name to the morning light, not as an apology, but as a farewell. Shah Jahan deserved peace. And perhaps, in letting him go, I was finally giving myself the same. As the sun broke through the clouds, I closed my eyes and let the light touch my face. It felt different this time, softer, forgiving. My husband watched. I whispered to no one, and I still lost everything. But maybe losing everything was what it took to finally see who I was beneath it all.